excited to be with you today. Today we will share the floor. I will do a presentation of about 15-20 minutes. Gavin will do another presentation afterwards on the same topic with a different perspective. And it's going to be a little bit like, for those of you that have been before in concerts, you know that when you go to a concert, the first part of the concert, it's also always the sort of, new guy that tries to warm up the crowd. So I'll be doing that, but then you get the real artists. Gavin is coming after. So Gavin will really brighten this presentation. So today's topic, obviously, is reconciling business performance with social progress. And it is something that is very dear to me. I've been working a lot on this in the past couple of years, or even 3 years. So I wanted to share this very relevant topic with you today, especially in view of the COVID pandemic. But allow me to start maybe with a little story. Now, in the 18th century, in France, actually, sorry, not in France, in Italy, not in Italy, the puerperal fever, also known as the Black Death of childbirth, was ravaging populations. In a sense, this spread all around Europe and even across to America. And what happened with this Black Death of childbirth is women would give birth and die within 48 hours of giving birth. Now, in some hospitals, in some regions, it was up to 70% of women who were dying because of this pandemic. Now, it was the 18th century, the age of science, so doctors at the time were very keen to try to understand what's going on, and they were relying on empirical data. So what they did is they performed a lot of study to try to find a reason, and they would take the bodies and go through the autopsies. So in the morning, they would conduct autopsies, trying to find out what happened to this person. And then in the afternoon, they would actually deliver babies, because it was usually at that time, there was the same doctor. So in the morning, they were conducting those autopsies. In the afternoon, they were delivering those babies. And the more time progressed, the more the pandemic progressed and started to spread, and it puzzled the scientific community. Now, at that time, the Dr. Oliver Waldman Holmes started to say, well, I think I found the reason. And he spoke to his fellow doctors, and he said, you are the reason why this pandemic is happening. And he said, well, you are the reason because you conduct autopsies in the morning, and then in the afternoon you give birth, or you deliver babies, but you don't wash your hands in between. So you're actually spreading germs, and this is the reason why we have this pandemic. Now, for about 30 years, imagine that, 30 years, doctors didn't believe that. They called him crazy. They thought that he was wrong. 30 years is a long time. After 30 years, they started to realize health and sanitation improved. They washed their hands, and all of a sudden, the puerperal fever disappeared. Now, the reason why I give this little story, it's not because of the current pandemic, although it's weirdly related today, but because today we are seeing a similar problem, not with the men of science, like it was the case in the 18th century, but with the men of finance, I call that. And this little story shows us that sometimes we are the problem. We don't need to look further, or we don't need to look very far. We actually are the problem. Sorry, I didn't put the slide, but this is not a slide of Gavin. I won't scare you. This is a slide that actually illustrates the Black Death of childbirth. Now, oops, I tried to go through the next one. Voila. Sorry. So what are we looking at today? So in the past 100 years, we've seen what we call, or what I like to call, the great transformation. The market has pushed out society. 100 years ago, as people, as persons, we were mostly part of villages, of communities. We were individuals. We were with our families. Today, we are mostly considered corporate people. See, when you introduce yourself to someone, you usually say, well, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm, whatever your profession is. So that's why I say by corporate persons have displaced natural people. And in the past 100 years, money has displaced meaning. So what is the role and responsibility of business in this development? And because obviously we're unhappy about the situation, so what is the role of business? Is that the kind of progress we want? And most importantly, is there a way to reconcile, yes, of course, business performance on one end, which is very important, but also the human aspect, societal progress. As Jared Diamond from UCLA quoted, businesses are going to play the bigger role in our societal progress. So far, it's been governments. Government have regulated societal progress, giving paid holidays, limiting the number of hours, creating a format for business to operate in that protects society or that protects the human being. That role will diminish for governments in the future, and that will be taken over mostly by businesses. Now, what does it mean for capitalism? What does it mean for our system? And first of all, what is capitalism? Now, there are many, many definitions for capitalism, but I like to sort of give two pillars for capitalism. The first one is, well, capitalism is based, one of the pillars is property rights. You own something. It's about owning something. Could be stock, could be property, could be, and that property right gives you incentive. And because I own this property, I get money from it, either by selling it or renting it and so on and so forth. The second pillar of capitalism.
Sorry to interrupt, but I still see the first picture on the screen.
Everybody, you see the last picture, or can you follow the picture with me or not?
No, Bertrand, I was about also to warn you because I was not sure what you wanted to show, but it is true that we don't see, we only have the first picture, okay, no. From the Middle Age.
Attends, hold on. Then what I'll do is I'll reshare the screen, sorry.
It's because Bertrand said it looked like Gavin, you see? This is
that's probably why.
Certainly.
Do you see it here?
We see your entire screen, not only the PowerPoint presentation, but if it is the only way you can go through the slide, you can also have
or maybe, attends, hold on. No. There's going to be a way. Don't worry. There's always a way. Share screen. Voila. Do you guys see it?
This is your screen, your entire screen. But we can go through this if you.
But do you see the presentation?
We see the presentation, but that's the right way, I think. Try to go through the presentation. The next slide, is that working? So perfect.
Very good. So basically, I'm not going to go back to those slides and describe what I was just saying in terms of the market pushing society, natural persons in the past becoming corporate, and so on and so forth. The concept of reconciling business performance with societal progress. The quote from Jared Diamond, and I'm here. So I'm gonna go back to that slide. This is where I was. So capitalism, again, two pillars in a sense: property rights, as I mentioned, which provides incentives. It's how I get money, how I get benefits in a sense. And the price mechanism, the market pricing, is the second big pillar of capitalism. It's how you price, well, property. So it's we believe under capitalism that the market self-regulates and prices accurately every property that you have. And this is a source of information. And actually, it's widely understood that the amount of information that is derived from price mechanism is actually greater than the amount of information that you have on the internet. So it's actually quite significant, quite important. But there are problems with this. There are imperfections with the system. And the first imperfection is, well, you know, when you look at the pricing, well, if you believe that the market accurately prices everything that we know, well, then what is the price of health? You know, what is the price of clean air? What is the price of human relations? You see, capitalism doesn't allow for the pricing of those very important parameters. Now, the second issue with our system is the concept of price fixing. And we know, for example, if you go to Nice today, we're in the French Riviera, so if you go to Nice, you buy, let's say, lemons, you will pay maybe €1. The lemon come from Menton, probably, very well-known capital of the lemons. Then you come to Monaco, you buy the same lemon that comes from the same producer, you pay them €2. Why? You know, and you see a lot of issues like this where pricing is either manipulated or pricing is not accurately reflecting the exact value of the item that you have. And the third issue is obviously misplaced incentives. I'm not going to spend a long time on this, but you all know the issue of, for example, corporate executives who get those huge bonuses when we are in the middle of crisis, or at the same time they are actually laying off some of their employees. So you see that we have issues currently. We have deep issues, and they're put at the forefront when we have a pandemic like the one we have today. So what is next? And what I propose is, well, let's try to see if we can refocus on human elements. And what I mean by human element is creativity, imagination, codependence and co-creation. I will define those in the next few slides. All things that, for example, computers can do, but this is inherently what this is the value of a human being. Now, and it's a little bit the path that on which I'm trying to move forward is, you know, how do we reconcile economics with the social? What is that road in the middle that sort of offers that reconciliation? Because frankly, without social, economics is barbarism. But without economics, social is utopia. So what is that path, that equilibrium that goes in the middle? And today I'd like to offer 3 milestones to sort of go over this issue. The first one is, well, I think everything starts with people. We tend to always blame the system, right? When we very often, I'm sure we can all share experiences of this when we're at work and we say, well, this is a system, this is how things work, right? And we blame some sort of system that overrides everything, that overpowers everything. And what I want to say here is, well, there is no system, you know? And I'll give you an example. If you're very familiar with Monaco, you know that driving in Monaco in the morning is absolutely hell, right? You have a lot of traffic jam, and one day I was caught into one of those traffic jams, and there was this guy with an open top car, and he was on the phone and obviously getting probably reprimanded by either his friends or his family for being late. And he was saying, well, you know, I'm sorry, I'm going to be late, but, you know, I'm here in the middle of the street. I can't move. There are all those idiots around. They're blocking me. And I got upset, you know, it was like, well, I'm one of those idiots, you know, so I took it a little bit personally. But then I thought, well, you know what? He's right. There is no traffic jam. I am the traffic jam. The traffic jam is not because there's road work or the poor weather or whatever other circumstance. The traffic jam exists because I purposefully took my car this morning and drove knowing that there would be other cars on the road. So there is no traffic jam. I am the traffic jam. There is no system. We are the system. You know, and we must stop believing that there is a system in the sense that prevents us from changing the world. In a sense, what I want to say is the world will change when we start to change our behaviors, our actions, our beliefs. So to start with human creativity, the ability to change the world. And now, when you look back into the corporate, because we talk about business here, all businesses, actually all institutions, private, public, every institution is here to maintain the status quo. All of them. You know, a corporation, a company, wants to make sure things don't change, contrary to what we say. But you know, within those institutions, within those companies, there are consciences that can rise. And the role of leaders is to allow for those consciences to express themselves and to sort of open the pathways to utopia. Now, this was a traffic jam. The second milestone now I'd like to point out is, well, if you want this change to last and build up even, you then have to sort of transition to an institutional logic. You have to make alliances. And this is about, well, what is your ecosystem? You know, there's a paradigm in business that says that, well, creating shareholders' value is the main responsibility of business. And yeah, you know, we all sort of operate under this assumption. And what I want to say here is, well, no, there is a whole ecosystem that we need to take care of that depends from our activity. And I'll give you the example of 2008, the financial crisis. And you may remember, financial crisis, a lot of companies going down, you know, the banking system, the financial system collapsing. And at that time, the European, especially the German and the French governments, but also the American governments, they did something, well, they did a lot of things to sort of patch up the situation, but in particular, they did one thing that I thought was very interesting. They went to the car companies and they told the car companies, you need to give back to your suppliers. You pulled too much towards you. You looked at your benefit, not at the benefit of your ecosystem. You depend, all those suppliers depend on you. So you need to give back, and they did. And that, in doing so, they broke a paradigm of, you know, well, my only objective is to create value for me. You know, so what you need to do here is, you know, who is in your ecosystem? Very broadly, who are those people that are willing to take a step on the side for you and break a paradigm and build something else with you? Yeah? And most importantly, how can you add value to those people?
Hello.
The third milestone.
I was scared I can hear you on
the third milestone is the treasure of relationship. And in a sense, fundamentally, I think this is the real issue. I think we hear some people, if you can mute. If you can mute, we can hear some people, please. So fundamentally, the third milestone is the treasure of relationship. And I'll give you an example. In November 2005, in Africa, Danone, the big food company, went in a social business venture with a bank, with a local bank in Bangladesh, which is called the Grameen Bank, I believe. And they decided to fight malnutrition in Africa. And to do so, they developed a yogurt, because Danone is very well known for making yogurt. They developed a yogurt which was called the Soktidoy, I believe. Very different from the yogurt we have here in Europe. It was all about having so many nutrients that it would actually fight malnutrition in the children for Bangladesh and young in Africa. So very great yogurt, and they were able to do it thanks to the help of Grameen Bank at a very cost-effective price, so that people could actually afford it. So one weekend, management of Grameen went to a little village about 30 kilometers from Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh, and they wanted to meet with all the women of the village. So they all dressed up in their weekend clothing, and they all sat here. And one of the top manager of Danone explained, you know, Shoktidoy, the great yogurt, lots of nutrients, good for your children. And then he opened up the conversation, and it was complete silence up until at the very back the room, a lady sort of, very timidly raised her hand and said, "Hi, good morning. My name is Yamina, and I have a question, please." And she said, "Well, today I babysit the kids of my neighbor, in exchange of which my neighbor gives me milk so I can make my own yogurt. Now, babysitting her kids allow her to go around all the villages around our village to sell her milk. And she comes back in the evening, having sold her milk, having done her business, she takes her kids back, and it's a win-win situation. Now, I understand that your yogurt is amazing for my kids. It will probably benefit the health of my kids. But you see, if I have to buy your yogurt, I have to start to work to be able to afford it. If I start to work, I cannot babysit the children of my neighbor. So what will happen to her?" And you see, this is one of the most difficult questions that I've ever been faced with. And I don't have an answer to that one. It's actually a management question. I don't have an answer to that one. And frankly, no one ever brought an answer to that type of question. And you see, the problem here is we are unable to see the relationship between Yamina and her neighbor as something else than the remnants of a very archaic, antiquated system. It's sort of a barter economy where you depend from someone else, where there is insecurity, where your survival depends from, in that sense, your neighbor, right? And what is our economy? Our economy is more a stock economy. It's about owning things. It's about being independent. I want to be able to, let's say, go to the supermarket and buy groceries without talking to someone. Actually, if I can do it on the internet, even better. I want to be able to go get money without talking to a banker. I don't want to depend from others. Now, Yamina's economy is more flow economy. It's more about risks, constant exchange, reaching out, depending, give and receive. I also put it as, the difference between an economy of having, which is our type of economy, and an economy of being, which is the economy or the system that we just described with these villagers in not far from Dhaka. So in a sense, I think we have dehumanized our economy. We have dematerialized our economy. Behind every financial transactions, there is no meaning anymore. And this is why our economy is dying in a sense, and it will die if we don't change it. It will die if we're unable to see the human value behind our transactions. And as long as we are in this sort of paradigm, we will not see the human value of relationship that is so important to Yamina and her neighbor. Now, to finish my part of the presentation, I wanted to quote a quote that I particularly like. A quote that I particularly like. "Beyond good and evil, there is a field. I will find you there." I stole that quote from Gavin, by the way. He will tell you that. He was quite upset. Anyway, I love that quote. "Beyond good and evil, there is a field. I will find you there." And what I wish for you is that you sit in that field as often as possible. And you will see that in welcoming human values and otherness, you will also get to know yourself. So in a sense, I want to finish by saying the world needs you, the world needs us, every single one of us. And I hope that in a sense, the path we drew today will help you through this journey. So let's get up and go. And I'm done, and I will transfer now to the real star of the day, Gavin. So I will disconnect my screen if I find how to do it. And Gavin, you can, the floor is yours. Alors maybe you want to, we don't hear you, Gavin, so you want to, I will mute myself.
That's good. Can you hear me?
Perfect, yeah.
Okay. Perfect. And then after my presentation, you can decide whether it was better for me to be muted or unmuted. So hopefully better like this. So thank you very much. And I'm really excited to be participating and joining you today. I'm going to put my stopwatch on so I don't speak for 3 hours. So I guess I come at this presentation from 2 different angles. I've had a career in business, and I spent 50 to 20 years working in the City of London, where I built up a global recruitment company. And in more recent years, I work as a psychotherapist and as executive coach. So I guess to go back to Bertrand's question, when people say, what do you do for a living? I guess my response is I work with people and I work with companies. And I'm fascinated by what happens when they come together. I'm fascinated by the psychology of motivation, the psychology of money. And there's a couple of things. I haven't heard Bertrand's slides before. He was too nervous I would steal them all. But I will tell you, there's a couple of things that really stood out for me. And one was, he said, and I wrote it down, the world will change when we change. And as a psychotherapist, I have a very privileged position because people come into my therapy room every day. Well, these days it's the virtual therapy room. And they share with me what's happening in their lives, in their relationships, in their workplaces. And one of the things that I really believe may come out of confinement, or at least there's the potential, is for the world to change. Because I think each one of us is asking a question now because of this experience. What do I want? Do I want still to be in a relationship with this person? Do I want to still be working for this company? And so in one sense, I think we're at a really interesting point in our life journey. And we may well look back at this time and say, this was the moment when the other slide that Bertrand put up was, money has displaced meaning. And I really wonder if this is a moment when maybe meaning won't displace money, but I wonder if we're going to give a different attribution to meaning. So what I'd like to do is share with you some personal experiences of both my time in business and some of what has come into my therapy room over the recent weeks and months, obviously not naming clients for reasons of confidentiality, but just sharing with you some of the trends that I'm observing. So now let me see if my technology works. And okay, so let me start. I don't know if you guys, can you all see that? Yeah, I'm hoping that you can see that okay.
Yep.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, okay, good. The first thing that's just occurred to me is I was about to say there's a picture of an old man, but I'm just looking at an old bald man who's sat there with his hands clasped and he's wearing a suit. So I'm going to move my hands because I'm not feeling very satisfied now that I see that picture. But let me start by sharing with you one of the key trends that I have seen from the moment I went into industry and to the moment perhaps I left it. So when I started my own company, I was very fortunate and we became the leaders in the field in our sector quite quickly. So imagine that picture of that handsome gentleman is me. And that's me conducting an interview. And people would come in to want to join our company, and I would sit there and I would have their CV, and I would sit there and I'd say, you know, I can see here on page 14 of your CV that you had a week's gap, you know, in 1973. Could you explain that to me, please? Actually, I'm not quite as old as that, but they would explain it to me and we'd make a decision on whether to hire that person or not. So last year, I was doing some consultancy work for a company. And they said, would you mind sitting in on an interview? We really want your view on our culture and how we do the interview. Maybe you can lead the interview. And I said, sure, I've got lots of experience. One of the shifts was I started asking some questions. And then this 23-year-old started saying, so tell me, Gavin, what's this company's policy on climate change? And also, Gavin, what's its policy on animal rights, do you think? And what's this, when will I get my first sabbatical? And I couldn't believe the shift from me being in the driving seat and me asking all these questions, and suddenly the person in front of me is asking me the questions. And this is a quote from a therapist who, if you're not familiar with her work, I really recommend you look at some of her TEDx talks, a lady called Esther Perel. And Esther Perel said, we used to go to work to make money, and now we go to work to make meaning. And if that shift is true, and we're all coming out of confinement thinking, actually, I want more meaning in my life, one part of that meaning is everything that Bertrand's been talking about. We want and hope that our companies that we work for are doing something in society. I'll give you another example. I sit on the board of a charity, and the number of lawyers who line up to do work for this charity pro bono is astounding. Top Wall Street law firms. And I've realized so many of these lawyers are bored, they are demotivated, and here's an opportunity to do something meaningful. And now, law firms are not being asked so much about how profitable are you, when will I make partner, but what's your policy on pro bono? Do you really care about society? And if this is a shift, companies need to wake up, they need to do it, and they need to do it seriously, not just ticking a box. That's what we did in the early 90s with diversity. We kind of ticked a box. Do we have someone here who isn't white, middle class? Great, she's gay, let's hire her. You know, we kind of caught on cynically. Companies need to change. So I think, as I said before, this is a fascinating time for this presentation to be happening. Because I think we're all working out, governments are working out. What's our role? How much do we need to do? How much do the people need to do? And where do companies fit into this? Let me share one theory with you, because as a psychotherapist, we're always asked to, where do you get this stuff from? Is there any evidence, or Gavin, do you just make the stuff up? Sometimes I make it up, but I try where possible to put some theory. So in the 1950s, there was a psychologist called Frederick Herzberg, and he was asked to do something which I'm often asked to do. Can you go into the workplace? Can you assess morale? What motivates our employees? And Herzberg came up with his two-factor theory, because what he discovered was there were certain things in the workplace that companies thought were motivating. So we have a good canteen, we have good parking, we have good lighting, the chairs are ergonomic. These are all things that we're proud make us a good employer. But guess what? These things didn't motivate the employees. What the employees said is, we expect this. If you take these things away, sure, we're going to be demotivated, but their sheer existence alone, that's not a reason to join this company. And I think back to my time now running a company, and people would say, well, what are the benefits? And I would say, well, you have a desk, you have a phone, there's toilets on the 3rd floor, there's so much here. And then you begin to realize these are the things, these are what he called the hygiene factors. Salary. We think if we pay someone a good salary, then they're going to be motivated to work hard. or give them a nice job title. You're now in charge of whatever. And actually what we're discovering is that we expect to go and be paid what we're worth. We expect to get promoted and have a good status. These are hygiene factors. Take them away and we may leave. What he was really interested in was the motivational factors. And this is where so much of what Bertrand's been talking about today comes into play. Because guess what? The motivational factors are psychological. If you create a workplace that I can identify with, if you have values that I can relate to, that's going to motivate me. So a sense of achievement, meaning in the workplace, and growth. These are the motivational factors. So the hygiene factors and the motivational factors. And even though Hertzberg developed his theory in the 1950s, I think this is so relevant to today. Are employers creating meaningful workplaces? And I think one of the things they need to do to achieve that is recognize their responsibility in society. So picking up again on what Bertrand's been saying, I don't think it's just Generation Z. I think that we're in this really interesting discussion at the moment of, is it people or is it profits? Because until now, the focus has been on profits. And I'd love to hear from some of you in a minute what do you judge when you look at joining a company? Or if you're in a position of hiring, what do you get asked by people? Because I can't be the only one that's seen this change in the power balance and what Generation Z, or just generally what people want. So rather than having to go to work and wear a mask, I started life as a lawyer. I wasn't a very good lawyer. I didn't last very long, but I trained and I qualified. And my mother was so happy. And if you ask her today what Gavin does, she'll say he's a lawyer. And I say, no, Mum, I'm a psychotherapist. I was a lawyer 20 years ago. But anyway, she was happy. So I went to the workplace and I had to fit their culture. I had to put on a mask. And for years, we've all accepted that when we go to work, I wear my corporate mask and you wear yours. And I just sense that that's changing. And people don't want to have to wear a mask. I want to be me. I want to be authentic. And I want you to be the same. Don't tell me that you support a charity and one day a year, 1% of the workforce gets to do something with that charity. That's not authentic. So I think one of the challenges is how do leaders create these psychologically safe workplaces where I can be me and leaders can be authentic. Because having some values on paper that are wonderful is no good unless those values are lived. So I'm going to finish by asking you a question. And it may well be that as you've been in confinement, either employed or unemployed, but as you think back now about the organization that you're in or your ideal organization, what's your why? Why are you working for them? And is that shifting? Is that changing? Because I think so many companies, I'm going to stop sharing, so many companies now, what they're being faced with is being asked this question, why you? It's not good enough just to say that you are the leader in your field. I want to know why. Because all of us are asking ourselves in confinement, why? So that's my bit. And along with Bertrand, I think we'd love to hear your observations and questions. And to Bertrand and the university, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And please tell me it was better with the sound on than with the sound off. That's my only request. Thank you.
It was great with the sound on, Gavin. And I love the photo of you on the first slide. This was new. You sneaked this one in. Anyway, any questions? Maybe we can open up, Sophie, maybe we can open up the floor to questions, if anybody has any questions.
Yes, don't forget to unmute your micro if you have a question.
No?
I'm gonna start by our own, let's say, corporate culture. Let's speak about IOM. I think that one of the most interesting exercise we have made at IOM is to think about our missions. And at the beginning, I was thinking that it was a kind of superficial, kind of must-have exercise. Okay, we have to think about our mission, etc. But at the end of the day, you know, I think that it is really sharing a mission and having all the people around, you know, all the employees contributing to define what is exactly the mission of a company, and then sharing the same vision aligned with the mission, actually was an exercise which brings us a lot in terms of having the same vision all together, but also trying to also decide on our own the priority for our own department and business, because we have the same vision. And so I think that the big company you mentioned, Danone, they have totally rethought their mission. A lot of Nestle and Danone, you know, they redefine them not as a food company, but a health company. And so that's interesting, the way they are rethinking about, you know, the missions. But I think that maybe the first exercise that the company has to maybe do all together, because they have their mission statement on their website, but I think it's something very collaborative, and maybe to try to start by sharing a mission and then a vision, so everybody has a meaning to what he's supposed to do.
Yeah. That was a good comment. And for those of you, there's a great author, and I'm sure most of you might know him, Simon Sinek, and he describes that very well in saying, well, there are two ways to communicate, or there are two ways to even conduct business in a way. Huh? Either you start with, you know, you go from the product, the what do you do, you know, and most companies, they sort of communicate on that. They try to explain, well, this is what we do, and this is the best, you should buy it, and so on and so forth. And then they go on to maybe the how, you know, well, what we do, and this is how we do it, and they never talk about the why. And he says, well, that successful companies start with the why. They start with the center. They start by first explaining what it is. It's not what I make that matters, it's why. And the last slide of Gavin falls right perfectly in that. Is really, the first question is why? Why are we here together? What are we trying to achieve from a very holistic standpoint? And I think once you've done that, you have created the ecosystem, you have created the environment where there it's easier to do the how and the what. But unfortunately, most organizations take it the other way around. They focus on the what. You know, what can we do? We have a product, we want to sell it. You know, they don't start with the center as to why. Why is that we are a team together and trying to create something together?
Yeah, and I was just going to jump in, Bertrand, picking on that, and then there may be some questions that follow. But if anyone's read about the kind of when Starbucks first started, and you know, if someone had come. You know, again, in those days, I lived I didn't live in Monaco, I lived in London. And on every street corner was a coffee shop. And you could, though, I don't know how much it was, maybe 50p. So, you know, less than €1 to buy a coffee. And if someone had actually come along with a business plan, I would have torn it up to say, we want to sell coffee. And instead of charging, you know, 50 cents, we're going to charge €2 for the coffee. I would have said it's crazy. But what they believed in so passionately was they're going to create an experience. And by having soft armchairs, a place to go and read. And, you know, we can all be a little bit more cynical now about Starbucks. But if you think about the pace of its growth and what they trained their employers was, we're not selling coffee, we're creating an experience. And I think companies that start to think about what's the experience, as you said, picking up on, you know, Simon Sinek's talk, why? I think it's a great, you know, great example.
Mm-hmm. And it's a very good exercise to do. It's very difficult because it's also very difficult to get everybody to agree on a why. Let's face it, huh? But it is a very valid exercise, and I think it sets the foundations right. You know, and then you know that you have your foundation. You know, for example, Apple did that very well. You know, Apple is not at the beginning, but now they changed a little bit, but they were not selling computers. They were in to change the world, you know, and that was their why. I don't remember exactly what the exact terminology was, but Apple at that time wouldn't say, well, we're a computer making company. You know, that's not the way they present themselves. And that's why they were so innovative, so creative, so passionate about what they were doing, because they understood that they needed to start with the why. It was very different at the time from IBM. IBM and Apple were competitors, and IBM was focusing entirely on the computer, on the what. So good example. Other questions or comments? No?
I'm curious to know, I mean, it may be people don't want to, people don't necessarily want to share, but I'd love to hear someone's in confinement. We've all been in confinement. We've all just coming out of lockdown. And have we kind of been, you know, has anyone here been kind of having these kind of existential questions about the companies, about work and rethinking things? I'd be really, either in the chat or whether you want to do it anonymously, but I'd love to know.
I think, but if you speak, make sure you unmute yourself. I don't know if, or on the chat. No?
Well, that's okay. I was just curious to know whether people.
They're too shy, Gavin. You're impressing them with your tie and. All right, Sophie, because we've been on a long time actually.
I just have one question to Gavin actually. You were mentioning that it is important to bring a sense of achievement and growth in a company, and I entirely agree with you. But as soon as you reach that point, you know, as soon as you brought achievement and growth to your employee, don't you think it is actually in the human nature to look and to ask for more? And what would be the more? What is the next? What is next after that?
I think it's a great question, and I think it's probably going to be different for everybody. And I think that next, it may be that, you know, you've joined that company and you feel that you and they together have gone on the journey as far as possible. I changed careers. I mean, yes, I integrate my corporate career with the coaching, but essentially I'm a psychotherapist because I got to a point where, and this is a different lecture for a different day, but what's the definition of success? And I felt like, okay, I've done what I came here to do. I've succeeded. And I had a huge argument with my business partners because they were, well, we're still carrying on and we don't think that we're done. But, you know, I felt like I'm done. So I want to move on. And I do believe that all of us have more than one career in us if we want to. So I'm not sure if that answers your question directly. I'm sitting on the fence slightly, but because I believe that it's going to be different. But if companies are truly, if leaders are really authentic, they're having constant dialogue with their staff. How are you doing? Are you fulfilled? And what else do you need from us? And if it's not from us, we wish you well to move on. Now, it's not a dialogue you hear very often, but I think it will be different depending on what motivates us. And also recognizing that changes. Because I can tell you, I don't know about you, Lilian, but what motivated me 10 years ago is very different to what motivates me today.
No, I completely agree. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think there was a question. Was it Patricia? Yeah.
I have a question. So for those, during this confinement, it was like speaking with another psychologist. It was like a mirror of our emotions and in a very short time, how we would feel on a long period, maybe for 6 months. It was concentrate as we had time to think a lot. So I really agree with all what you said, and thank you very much. I have a question or a remark saying, okay, for changes of a company or career, sometimes it's not, don't you think that maybe people with who we work with, we will get same of problems in other companies? In French, we say l'herbe n'est pas plus verte ailleurs. So maybe you will get along one moment and good moment with your boss, and then the moment after, things are going wrong, you don't know why, if it's ego, if it's something you misunderstood, if it's a more human problem. And those kind of human problem, we will always face it in other careers and in other companies. So for me, for instance, I created an association as I couldn't find in my job complete fulfillment of what I needed with human relationships and social. So besides of what I do in finance, I created something in more creative and association. And I don't think changing job would be so. Finance and human is complicated. What do you think?
I'll give a first answer, Gavin. You probably will have a longer answer than me, but first of all, well, we're talking about human beings. So by essence, you put several human beings in a room. And again, as I mentioned, when you try to work on a why, they'll never agree. So by essence, you always will have conflicts. And also we evolve, like Gavin said. What suits us today might not suit us tomorrow. So we change, our expectations change. The interactions with people also changes. You may get along very well one day, and then for some reason, there's conflict, and then it's up to you to work on this conflict. So this whole ecosystem changes around you, and that it's all about, again, creativity and adaptation and being able to, there's a critical point where you really say, well, despite all the creativity, adaptation, and I don't belong here. I think there comes a point where you just feel, and I think there is a threshold, where you say, well, this I can deal with, I'm okay with that, and it's normal to have conflicts. You'll never have total fulfillment. But you feel comfortable, and then there's a threshold where you all of a sudden say, I don't belong here. And whatever defines that threshold is very personal. It depends on today's expectations, what your situation, your environment, your private life. But it's never black and white. That's what I wanted to say in a sense. Gavin, I don't know if you have more input.
No, I think you answered it perfectly. So I don't need to add to it. I thought there was. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, can I take your job, Gavin?
Well, you didn't do it as well, but you did it. It's good enough. But, no, I tell you what I was going to say. I'll tell you a personal story. So, for me, I was very happy doing what I was doing, running my company for a period of time. And then that was my threshold, that I no longer felt that, as a company, each year we're becoming more and more obsessed with profits. And that was okay up to a point. And then I no longer felt authentic. And then I no longer felt that this was what I wanted. So for me, that was crossing the threshold. I think just one point that picking up, and I think the question is, if I also realize though personally that there's a issue here that I've worked now, let's say for 4 companies in the last 2 years, and I'm having the same problem with the same, but with different leaders, then that's the type of thing that we sometimes go to therapy for. And it's just like, or it's like a relationship. A couple comes to couples therapy because I keep hitting the same roadblock, and that's an opportunity for growth. So some of it is we have to look internal. Is this my stuff? Is this my baggage that is to do with the stuff that I bring because of my early childhood stuff and etc.? Or is there something fundamentally wrong with the company?
I think you have a question, Gavin, on the chat. I don't know if you see the chat.
Question. The current situation is going to transform the way we conduct our daily lives forever, as some changes will be irreversible for the better. What are the major themes you detect when speaking with clients that are heralding the changes that are here to stay forever? Michael, do you feel confident enough to come on the camera? I just want to make sure I understand the last part of your question. but you don't have to. So here's what, you don't have to, okay. So I'll just give you a very brief, I'm not sure I understood that very last part, but broadly speaking, as I said during the presentation, I think that one of the things we're having to live with is uncertainty is the new norm. And I think we're having to manage the themes that are coming up in therapy, is we're having to manage our anxiety. We're having to grieve for what we've lost. And I think as we come out the lockdown, you know, France and Monica now, we've come out of this period, there's even more anxiety than before. Because when I was in lockdown, I kind of knew the rules and it was very black and white. And now I'm a bit more confused about how far can I go for a walk with how many friends? How safe is it to socially distance? When will the restaurants open? Do I want to go? And I'm seeing lots of clients come in with struggling with this, what I call anticipated anxiety and anticipated loss. So I think it's a roller coaster. I mean, I recently wrote a blog and I just finished by saying this, that certainly one of the themes that I've witnessed is this sense of feeling inadequate. I thought I was going to achieve so much more in lockdown because when you look at social media, everyone else is achieving so much and I don't feel like I've achieved as much. And what I've said to people is I think we need to lower the bar because at a time of so much anxiety, I won't be my most creative and I won't be at my best. And I can see now there's some more comments. I don't want to dominate. I don't know, Bertrand, if you've got anything to add.
No, that's more your turf.
Yeah.
I think we have also a comment. Eliana wanted to share something on that point. Eliana?
Hi, everybody. I don't know if you can see me well. I'm actually driving. Yeah. So I just stopped for a minute. First of all, thank you for this invitation to this talk. It's quite interesting. And I would like to come back to something that Gavin said, because I actually want to express a feeling and see if you're like sharing the same. Coming back to what Gavin said, which really resonated to me, that before people were going to work to make money, and now they're going to work to to find a meaning and bring their own contributions. I felt that I've been working in the cruise business for the past 20 years. Up to now, I really felt there was a sort of a gap, like a clear separations in between my professional life and personal life, in the sense that, you know, like as Kevin said, we need to wear a mask, and the main values were like productivity, performance, efficiency, and so on. And then on the other side, it was like my personal development, my personal growth. And I have the feeling that even before COVID, to be honest with you, there is this, like many of us are trying to integrate the personal development and the growth in their workplace, in their work ethic, you know, and before there was this like net separation, but now I feel that many of us understand when you work on your personal development, it also benefits your work, it benefits your working relationships, and there is a sort of a merge of what was our like you can call it like spiritual life or like personal development or personal growth or whatever, and your career growth, your performance, the meaning that you give, the contribution that you give into your workplace. So this is just like food for thought, and I would like to know what you all think about this.
Yeah, Gavin?
I think, again, I think really just picking up on that theme of, I think it's Bertrand's point of, I don't know if you got the tipping point or the threshold point. And it's just, look, there's also reality here. You know, we also have to have an income. So it's not like we can all just live in la la land and we can all just say, well, you know, I want to work for a company that has these values, or I'm not going to go to work, because at some point we also have to pay the bills. So sometimes I think it's a balance between at this point in my life, this organization suits me. And yet, as I recognize that my values are here and the organization's values are here, and the more that this happens, the more I start to feel, do you know what? My personal values are not aligned with this company's values. And that's the point where we start to very often kind of, not, I'm generalizing slightly, but we get to our kind of 40s, you know, the midlife crisis. But what matters to us at that point in our life, particularly if we've had some success, it's shifted, it's changed. And that personal development, you know, we start to reprioritize. Let's go back to Bertrand's point about, you know, meaning, money and meaning. And so in the early parts of my career, money was more important than meaning. And then I shifted. So again, I think it's very personal to all of us. I'd love to hear from other people what their experiences of that.
But what I mean, Gavin, is that I think that this shift, it's happening for many of us. And I think that many are realizing that when they work on their personal growth, awareness, mindfulness, they're better performers at work. And money flows. At one point, there is this shift. And you realize that when your priorities as well shift, then you have major improvements as well in your career. But you sign better contracts with companies which are more in value with your companies, more abundance flows. When before there was this net separations and struggle, now you merge, as you say, you're more authentic in how you perform. You don't wear a mask all the time. And I see that when you work on your mindfulness, you have, actually this is what I'm experiencing, you have like better results as well in your workplace. Of course, if you're aligned, you know, to your purpose.
Absolutely. So,
and if your career, let's say, reflects what you want to do, what you're passionate about doing. And I think it's something like really, really interesting that as more mindful you are, as more awareness you are, business flows to you like in a more positive manner. So this is like what was my main question, you know, and see if other amongst you are experiencing the same.
So let me just briefly say, it's a great point. And I think that, you know, again, some of the work I've done with companies is where a company will say, look, we have Joe, and Joe is a senior manager, and we don't want to lose Joe, but Joe just seems to be a little bit flat, or they're less motivated. And a great executive coach then says, okay, Joe, what's going to take? Because this company wants you. And actually by helping Joe grow, have some personal growth, find some meaning. Yeah, it doesn't always mean that Joe's going to leave the company. It could mean that Joe suddenly gets to resolve some of the obstacles, some of the blockages, and the company creates the permission that this person's allowed to speak out and say, I'm not that happy. Maybe I've had some relationship problems. Maybe I need to change my working hours, but help me be more authentic. And then guess what? Their sales figures start to go up, their motivation goes up, they run better teams. So I think it's a great point that you make. And let's not assume that once I get to know myself, I'm going to leave my employer. That may be my experience, but lots of people suddenly become much more engaged in the workplace. But it requires the employer to really see you. Do I get you? Do I see you? Am I committed to help you be the best version of yourself? Because that's what corporate coaching is all about.
Thanks, Gavin. Thanks to all of you.
Great contribution.
Thanks for your comments.
Yeah.
Drive safely, Eliana.
Thanks, Bertrand.
I think that we have shared a lot, etc. So for the one who are interested, I could share the recording of the session. And I would like as well to thank you very much, Bertrand and Gavin, for their presentation this morning, very insightful. I think it was a good start for all the series of webinars that we would like to launch. I think we have to rethink the purpose, so it's really very important. And I would say even the new technology, you know, I'm thinking about having someone, an expert of artificial intelligence, to share a bit that point, which is without thinking about the purpose, you know, the technology will not help us. and will lead us, to a wall. So I think we have many, many things to develop on that topics on purpose. Thank you for your contribution, and thank you for the first attendees of this webinar series. I hope that you enjoyed it. Again, don't hesitate to share to us, both Bertrand, Gavin, and me, some topics that you would like us to cover. I think it's good also to have an interactive and collaborative thinking on that point. And I wish you bon appétit.
Thank you. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bon appétit. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.